Greetings, gaming citizens, Mike here, and welcome back to another episode of Point of Viewer, the show that will analyze anything except for a consistent upload schedule. I swear I'm trying my best. The Legend of Zelda is a series that needs no introduction. For over 35 years, generations have shared in the joy of traversing the many iterations of Hyrule as Link, exploring dungeons, collecting rupees, defeating the Dark Lord, you know the drill. However, for the first time in those many years, Nintendo has flipped the script on us. This past June, in a Nintendo Direct, we were presented with what we thought would be another fantastic Zelda game, this time returning to the 2.5D style of Link's Awakening. But after seeing Link get taken by a rift, we were met with the groundbreaking reveal that in this game, it is Zelda that will be saving Link. And that's where our journey begins. With this being a first in the series, my only questions going into this were, will this game live up to the hype, and how will Nintendo reinvent the gameplay with a different protagonist? Well, let's go back to where it all began and ask the age-old question, did the trailers do this game justice? Let's sit back and watch these trailers from a point of viewer. Our first trailer comes from the game's reveal in the June Direct from this year. Since it's taken from a Direct, I'll be skipping over brief segments of commentary from series producer Eiji Aonuma, as I want to focus on the trailer itself. That said, if Aonuma or the narrator says anything that paints a fuller picture for the trailer's contents, I will bring those up as needed. The trailer starts with a cloaked figure fighting enemies, which is quickly revealed to be Link after confronting Ganon. After some brief combat with Ganon, he disappears from his defeat with his staff sticking in the floor. It's only when Link is about to reunite with Zelda that we see the staff open a rift in the ground. The rift swallows up Link, but not before he fires a single arrow to shatter the crystal, keeping Zelda captive. After the crystal shatters, we see Zelda run outside the dungeon as the rift expands, with Zelda looking over a cliff, overseeing Hyrule, and the logo fades in on screen. After a brief commentary from Aonuma, we see the words "stolen away" on screen for a brief moment, to reference that Link was taken away from Zelda, and then we cut to some scrolling shots of various points of interest, those being the rifts that have appeared all over Hyrule. After a few brief shots of characters being taken by the rifts, the trailer cuts to Zelda in a prison cell communicating with some sort of spectral being, who is quickly revealed to be the mysterious fairy named Tri. They are really on the nose with the Triforce in this one, huh? After spawning in a staff for Zelda to wield, Zelda and Tri start embarking on their journey. The trailer then fades into multiple shots demonstrating the core gameplay of deploying echoes of objects to traverse the world.
You can create wooden boxes, old beds, and unusual things like water blocks. How you use them separately or together is entirely up to you. Learn and create echoes of things you find while exploring Hyrule. You might be surprised at what you discover.
After those shots, the trailer shows off the ability to obtain echoes of monsters you find in the overworld who end up fighting for you. This trailer switches between a few scenes showcasing the variety of abilities monsters can have when you spawn echoes of them, indicating that some monsters can be more useful in certain situations. Then we fade into a few more gameplay clips showcasing the abilities that were just introduced, and giving the viewer a better sense of the world they are traversing, including what characters and enemies you can encounter. To cap off the trailer, there's a sizzle reel of Zelda gaining multiple echoes of objects and enemies to showcase the sheer number of things you can create echoes of in the game. While this is going on, Aonuma even says that he hasn't even counted them all. Aonuma also details that the game is open-ended, and that every player will have a different experience with how you could solve any puzzle by your own means. A gameplay philosophy that has been seen in the likes of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. The trailer ends with some key art, revealing the release date of September 26th, as well as showing off the Zelda Edition Switch Lite that I will never be able to buy because it probably sold out in the pre-orders already. Overall, this was a surprising reveal, to say the least. After last year's Tears of the Kingdom, I figured we would be waiting a while before the next mainline Zelda game, but I think it's safe to say that this game took everyone by surprise. Also, the collective reaction to being able to play as Zelda for the first time ever was amazing.
Guys, this is the Zelda game. We're gonna play as Zelda. It's a Zelda game. It's a Zelda game. It's gonna be. Oh my God. Oh! It's a Zelda game.
Our next trailer dropped on August 5th, as Nintendo likes to promote games within a 3-month period leading up to release. Although, curiously, Nintendo had no trailers go live in the month of July, with only a brief clip being posted to Twitter on July 24th, but I might be getting ahead of myself here. Let's just dive right into the trailer. Accompanied by a narrator, we see the words "A Tour of Hyrule" appear on screen, which is immediately letting the viewer know that this will be covering the points of interest you can expect to come across in the game's world. To start off, we see a variety of scrolling shots in Hyrule's kingdom, and then we get into the first major area, the Gerudo Desert. Here we see some gameplay of Zelda walking around the desert. In this section, we see Zelda approach what appears to be a guarded kingdom, fight off enemies in a cave with an enemy echo, and approach an oasis. After briefly scaring one of the guards by spawning a bed out of thin air, we transition over to Jabul Waters. After a couple scrolling shots of the waters, we see Zelda encounter both Sea Zoras and River Zoras, which if I'm not mistaken is the first time both species of Zora have been present in the same game. After a few more shots of Zelda exploring the area, we see that both Zora species don't exactly play nice with one another, which I can only assume will be a compelling side plot in the final game. Next, we are shown the Elden Volcano and are greeted with shots of what looks like traversable walls and the return of Kakariko Village. Although according to the narrator, the home of the Gorons is also here, but you'll need to overcome some obstacles to get there. After a brief scene with the Goron enjoying some rock roast, we are taken to the Faron Wetlands. After some scrolling shots, we see Zelda encounter a Deku Scrub, while also showing off that they have quite a fondness of cotton candy, which I'm sure will make for a pretty fun side story in the game. Surprisingly enough, that is all we see of the wetlands, as the trailer then fades into a sizzle reel of the different side quests that you could pursue around the game world, ranging from rifts inside of caves to fighting off enemies to save people. It's here we see the UI for the quest log, which will be very familiar for any Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom players. After showing off more side quests you can do in the game, the trailer transitions to talking about travel waypoints, the game's fast travel mechanic. However, in the same breath, the trailer then introduces your ability to ride a horse across the overworld to traverse the world faster. The trailer then gets into other side mechanics for your adventure, including the smoothie shops run by Deku Scrubs. These smoothies will give you various enhancements, though they aren't specified in the trailer. Next, we get into the gear you can purchase in the game, including the Zora Flippers. Although in the same frame, we also see potions that you can also presumably buy in addition to the smoothies from a moment ago. After briefly showing off how gear can change Zelda's appearance, we get into one of your main abilities, Bind. After the voiceover mentions that sometimes echoes aren't enough to solve puzzles, they introduce Bind, which is essentially just Ultra Hand from Tears of the Kingdom. We then see some scenarios where Bind is useful, such as unearthing buried chests and moving enemies. The trailer also brings up Reverse Bond, which lets you follow an object or creature to traverse obstacles in the world. After that, we see a rift completely cover Hyrule Castle and spawn shadow enemies, accompanied by a few shots of how the rifts affect other parts of the world. To end off the trailer, we can see Tri create a portal inside the rift, implying we can enter the rifts in certain places. It's after this that the trailer fades out to the release date. I think this trailer did a good job of showing just how open of a concept the game is. You get an idea of what echoes can be capable of, as well as what Zelda can do individually to traverse the world. Showing off the conflicts between characters, like with the Zora species, builds a bit of intrigue as to what kinds of sub-stories are present in the world, but the lack of focus on other sub-stories, like the Faron Wetlands, left a bit to be desired in terms of context. Compared to the other areas that we saw, Faron Wetlands only really had a few seconds, and all we knew was that Deku's like cotton candy. How did these forest creatures get a hold of the cotton candy in the first place? Why did they develop a sweet tooth? How does this connect to the larger story? Does it connect to the larger story at all? I get that we're supposed to figure this stuff out for ourselves, but it felt like the introduction to that area in particular was a tad shallow. Also, it would be helpful if the trailer included a bit more of the UI elements to give players an idea of how to switch between echoes, but I suppose that sort of thing is reserved for the tutorials in that game, so I suppose it's more of a moot point. Still, this was a great trailer for how well it both lightly covers the gameplay, but leaves enough for the viewer to think about how they will go about traversing Hyrule themselves. This next trailer was made public on August 30th, just under a month before the game's release. After the previous one ended with Zelda jumping into a rift, this trailer aims to pick up where the previous one left off. We start with rifts appearing around Hyrule Castle, with the king and his servants getting consumed by the rift. After, we see roaming shots of various rifts around the world, and we once again see Tri create a portal to enter the rift, and are greeted with the headline, Navigating the Still World. We start this section with a few roaming shots of what looks like a distorted, fragmented world composed of pieces of Hyrule that were swallowed up by the rifts. We see Zelda make her way through the still world using the echoes she has learned so far, leading us into the core purpose of the still world: dungeons. For the most part, these dungeons appear reminiscent of previous 2D Zelda games, but in shots like this corridor, it gives me the impression that this time around they will be a bit more open in terms of space to traverse. After seeing some of the concepts at play in the dungeons, we get to the bosses and how you can experiment with echoes and your own abilities to overcome the challenges that await you at the end of each dungeon. It's clear that there is no single correct way to beat a boss, and you can experiment using a combination of your echoes and the abilities Zelda herself has. Next, we are met with scrolling shots of multiple sections of the still world, demonstrating how different the puzzles and traversal can be depending on where you enter the world from. After seeing some clips of Zelda moving past some obstacles in the still world, we transition over to learning about the Sword Fighter form. This starts off with Zelda picking up what appears to be some random mysterious sword. However, the trailer quickly shows that this sword helps Zelda embody the combat abilities of Link and swing the sword around. Or at least she can for a limited time, as the trailer shows off the energy meter needed to use it, accompanied by a level, implying that you can increase the capacity of the bar later in the game. To end off this section, the trailer quickly shows off that you can refill said energy by collecting it in the still world, leading me to believe that this ability should only be used in that area unless there's a way to replenish it in the overworld. The next section is headlined Inhabitants of Hyrule, and we start by learning about what Dampé can do for the hero. Dampé has the ability to create automatons, which sounds suspiciously close to the name of those automaton instruments, but I digress. These gizmos have a variety of effects as demonstrated in the trailer. We see one deal some area of effect damage, another one produce music notes that damage enemies, and another one that shoots projectiles. It's in the last instance that we see that they are not exactly the most durable things out there, as they can break after taking damage. It's after this intro to Dampé that we get a brief reel of other characters you meet in Hyrule, including what looks like a stamp guy. Rest in peace, Tingle, I guess. After a brief montage of Zelda traversing various environments and obstacles, giving the viewer just a glimpse of what they can do in the game, we fade to the release date. I think this trailer was good, but I can't help but think that some of these features mentioned could have just been in the previous one. For a trailer titled Into the Still World, A Journey Continued, I would think that this just focuses on the still world exclusively, but the last third of the trailer just seemed to go over other features that aren't exclusive to the still world at all. This isn't to say that this makes this trailer worse by any means, as the main focus was still the still world. But the Inhabitants of Hyrule section could have easily just fit into the Traversing Hyrule trailer in my opinion. Regardless, this trailer was still great at showing off what you're able to do in the still world and what kinds of obstacles you can expect to face. Now, you might be a little confused, as there is an overview trailer that was released 2 weeks before the game came out. I chose not to cover that one, as it is quite literally a highlight reel of the other trailers that we have looked at today. What I will say about it is it does a good job at covering just the crucial gameplay mechanics and story beats in a streamlined fashion. After giving these trailers a watch, I sat down and played a few hours of Echoes of Wisdom to get an idea of how these trailers reflect the final product. What I noticed is that all of the features kinda just show up in the first hour. In fact, pretty much every feature except the horse riding came up in the first dungeon. The way the trailer presented the gameplay, I was under the impression that we would progressively get access to Sword Fighter form and Bind, but in the game, you pretty much get access to them around the same time. And in the Still World trailer, the narration talked about these dungeons being massive to explore. To the game's credit, I definitely took quite a bit of time exploring when I played through the first few dungeons, but they also didn't feel like massive dungeons by any means. They just felt like the scale of a typical 2D Zelda dungeon. Again, that's not a bad thing, but the terminology used in the trailer made it sound like these would be on the scale of the 3D games, but in 2D. If I were to change something about the trailers, I would replace the term massive with intricate, as the emphasis is clearly on the puzzles you encounter as opposed to the size of the area you can explore. Also, one small thing I want to bring up is in the same clip, the gameplay shows Zelda fighting Darknuts. Usually Zelda games have enemies like these in the late game since they're bulky enemies that deal a lot of damage, but this gameplay is in the first dungeon. The same trailer does also include gameplay from the second dungeon in the Gerudo region, but most of the gameplay is from the very beginning of the game. Now, I want to stop myself here because I think this raises an important question that can change how I continue this show in terms of evaluating trailers' gameplay footage use. Does it make sense to use gameplay from early game areas for trailers, or do you think the gameplay capture artists could stand to include footage from more than just the first dungeon or so? Put your opinions in the comments down below, as these insights from viewers of the show will help me solidify a baseline for critical analysis when viewing trailers. To wrap up the review of the game, it's an incredible entry in the Zelda series, and the open-ended nature of using all sorts of echoes you find around the world to solve puzzles and traverse Hyrule makes the game very entertaining to play. I highly recommend this game if you're looking for a Zelda game that reinvents the gameplay but still has the charm of dungeon exploration, while allowing room for players to make their own adventure with the wide range of echoes found in the game. The trailers for Echoes of Wisdom do a good job of showing players how the game works, while also encouraging them to explore the land of Hyrule by their own means. The emphasis on creative thinking by the player develops intrigue on how prospective players will go about playing the game themselves, and overall showcases the variety of puzzles very well. Do you have any other thoughts on the trailers for The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if there's a game that you think I should cover on Point of Viewer next, use hashtag Point of Viewer on Twitter to suggest games for me to feature here. That's going to be it for me. Stay vibing and thriving, everyone, and I will see you in the next one.